هيهات أنت أكرم من أن تضيع من ربيته، أو تبعد من أدنيته، أو تشرد من آويته، أو تسلم إلى البلاء من كفيته ورحمته. وليت شعري يا سيدي وإلهي ومولاي أتسلط النار على وجوه خرت لعظمتك ساجدة، وعلى ألسن نطقت بتوحيدك الصادقة وبشكرك مادحة، وعلى قلوب اعترفت بإلهيتك محققة، وعلى ضمائر هوت من العلم بك حتى صارت خاشعة، وعلى جوارح سعت إلى أوطان تعبدك طائعة، وأشارت باستغفارك مذعنة. ما هكذا الظن بك، ولا أخبرنا بفضلك عنك يا كريم يا ربي، وأنت تعلم ضعفي عن قليل من بلاء الدنيا وعقوباتها، وما يجري فيها من المكارح على أهلها، على أن ذلك بلاء ومكروح، قليل مكثوه، يسير بقاؤه، قصير مدته. فكيف احتمالي لبلاء الآخرة وجليل وقوع المكاره فيها، وهو بلاء تطول مدته ويدوم مقامه ولا يخفف عن أهله، لأنه لا يكون إلا عن غضبك وانتقامك وسخطك. وهذا ما لا تقوم له السماوات والأرض يا سيدي، فكيف لي وأنا عبدك الضعيف الذليل الحقير المسكين المستكين؟ يا إلهي وربي وسيدي ومولاي، لي الأمور إليك أشكو، ولما منها أذج وأبكي، لأليم العذاب وشدته أم لطول البلاء ومدته، فلن سيرتني للعقوبات مع أعدائك، وجمعت بيني وبين أهل بلائك، وفرقت بيني وبين أحبائك وأوليائك. فهبني يا إلهي وسيدي ومولاي وربي، صبرت على عذابك، فكيف أصبر على فراقك؟ وهبني يا إلهي، صبرت على حر نارك، فكيف أصبر عن النذر إلى كرامتك؟ أم كيف أسكن في النار ورجائي عفوك؟ فبعزتك يا سيدي ومولاي أقسم صادقا لئن تركتني ناطقا ليذجن إليك بين أهل هذا جيج الآملين، ولأصرخن إليك صراخ المستصرخين، ولأبكين عليك بكاء الفاقدين، ولأنادينك أين كنت يا ولي المؤمنين. يا غاية آمال العارفين، يا غياث المستغيثين، يا حبيب قلوب الصادقين، ويا إله العالمين، أفتراك سبحانك يا إلهي وبحمدك تسمع فيها سود عبد مسلم سجن فيها بمخالفته، وذاق طعم عذابها بمعصيته، وحبس بين أطباقها بجرمه وجريرته، وهو يذج إليك ضجيج مؤمل لرحمتك، ويناديك بلسان أهل توحيدك، ويتوسل إليك بربوبيتك. يا مولاي، فكيف يبقى في العذاب وهو يرجو ما سلف من حلمك أم كيف تؤلمه النار وهو يعمل فضلك ورحمتك أم كيف يخلقه لهيبها وأنت تسمع صوته وترى مكانه أم كيف يشتمل عليه زفيرها وأنت تعلم ضعفه أم كيف يتقلقل بين أطباقها وأنت تعلم صدقه أم كيف تزجره زبانيتها وهو يناديك يا ربه أم كيف يرجو فضلك في عتقه منها فتتركه فيها هيهات ما ذلك الظن بك ولا المعروف من فضلك ولا مشبه لما عاملت به الموحدين من برك وإحسانك فباليقين أقطع لولا ما حكمت به من تعذيب جاهديك وقضيت به من إخلاد معانديك لجعلت النار كلها بردا وسلاما وما كانت لأحد فيها مقرا ولا مقاما لكنك تقدست أسماؤك أقسمت أن تملأها من الكافرين من الجنة والناس أجمعين وأن تخلد فيها المعاندين وأنت جل ثناؤك قلت مبتدئا وتتولت بالإنعام متكرما أفمن كان مؤمنا كمن كان فاسقا لا يستوون إلهي وسيدي فأسألك بقدرة التي قدرتها وبالقضية التي حتمتها وحكمتها وغلبت من عليه أجريتها أن تهب لي في هذه الليلة وفي هذه الساعة كل جرم أجرمته وكل ذنب أذنبته وكل قبيح أسررته وكل جهل عملته كتمته أو أعلنته أخفيته أو أظهرته وكل سيئة أمرت بثباتها الكرام الكاتبين الذين وكلتهم بحفظ ما يكون مني وجعلتهم شهودا علي مع جواره وكنت أنت الرقيب علي من ورائهم والشاهد لما خفي عنهم وبرحمتك أخفيته وبفضلك سترته وأن توفر حظي من كل خير أنزلته أو إحسان فضلته أو بر نشرته أو رزق بسطته أو ذنب تغفره أو خطأ تستره يا ربي يا ربي يا رب يا إلهي وسيدي ومولاي ومالك رقي يا من بيده ناسيتي يا عليما بضري ومسكنتي يا خبيرا بفقري وفاقتي يا ربي يا ربي يا رب أسألك بحقك وقدسك وعظم صفاتك وأسمائك أن تجعل أوقاتي في الليل والنهار بذكرك معمورة وبخدمتك موصولة وعمالي عندك مقبولة حتى تكون أعمالي وأورادي كلها وردا واحدا وحالي في خدمتك سرمدا يا سيدي يا من عليه معولي يا من إليه شكوت أحوالي يا ربي يا ربي يا رب قوي على خدمتك جواره واشدد على العزيمة جوانه وهب لي الجد في خشيتك والدوام في الاتصال بخدمتك حتى أصلح إليك في ميادين السابقين وسع إليك في المبادرين واشتاق إلى قربك في المشتاقين وادنو منك دنو المخلصين وخافك مخافة الموقنين واجتمع في جوارك مع المؤمنين. اللهم من أرادني بسوء فأرده ومن كادني فكده واجعلني من أحسن عبيدك نسيبا عندك وأقربهم منزلة منك وأخسهم زلفة لديك فإنه لا ينال ذلك إلا بفضلك وجد لي بجودك وعطف علي بمجدك واحفظني برحمتك واجعل لساني بذكرك لهجا وقلبي بحبك متيما ومن علي بحسن إجابتك وأقلني عثرتي واغفر زلتي فإنك قضيت على عبادك بعبادتك وأمرتهم بدعائك وضمنت لهم الإجابة. فإليك يا رب نسبت وجهي وإليك يا ربي بددت يدي فبعزتك استجب لي دعائي وبلغني مناي ولا تقطع من فضلك رجائي واكفني شر الجن والإنس من أعدائي يا سريع الرضا اغفر لمن لا يملك إلا الدعاء فإنك فعال لما تشاء يا من اسمه دواء وذكره شفاء وطاعته غنى ارحم من رأس ماله الرجاء وسلاحه البكاء يا سابغ النعم يا دافع النقام يا نور المستوحشين في الظلام يا عالما لا يعلم صل على محمد وآل محمد وافعل بي ما أنت أهله وصلى الله على رسوله والأئمة الميامين من آله وسلم تسليما كثيرا كثيرا. الفاتحة.
Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters. Inshallah, today don't really have a short poem. Inshallah, tomorrow. But before that, my daughter, Ayyam-e-Fatimiyyah, would like to recite her new surah, Surah Allah. But when Wali Muhammad, salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa tuyubitini.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Isma rabbikal a'la alladhi khalaqa fasawwa walladhi qaddara fahada walladhi akhrajal mar'a faja'alahu husa'an ahwa sanu'uka fala tansa إلا ما شاء الله إنه يعلم جهر ما يخفى وننزلك اليسرى فذكر إن نفعت الذكرى يذكر ويخشى ويتجنبها الأشقى الذي يصلى النار الكبرى ثم لا يموت فيها ولا يحيا قد أفلح من تزكى وذكر اسم ربه وسوى وذكر أسوأ فصلى ذكر إن نفعت الذكرى تذكر من يخشى ويتجنبها الأشقى الذي يصلى النار الكبرى ثم لا يموت فيها ولا يحيا قد أفلح من تزكى وذكر اسم ربه فصلى بل تؤثرون الحياة الدنيا والآخرة خير وأبقى إن هذا لفي الصحف الأولى صحف إبراهيم وموسى صدق الله العلي العظيم.
اللهم صل على بمرض وآل محمد صلوات. فاطمہ زہرا فاطمہ زہرا یا زہرا یا زہرا یا زہرا یا زہرا اے میری بی بی اے میری بی بی تیرے در پہ استغاثہ ہے تیرا ممنون مہر شہزادی جہاں سارا ہے یا زہرا یا زہرا یا زہرا یا زہرا تو ہمیں حفظ اور عما دے دے اپنی چادر کا سائبہ دے دے تیری قدرت میں کیا نہیں بی بی تو جسے چاہے دو جہاں دے دے یا زہرا یا زہرا یا زہرا یا زہرا فرش مجلس پہ اور مصلی پر ہر جواں کہہ رہا ہے رو رو کر ہم رہے نہ رہے مگر بی بی تھا قیامت رہے غم سرور یا زہرا یا زہرا یا زہرا یا زہرا اے میری بی بی اے میری بی بی تیرے بچوں کا غم مناتے ہیں اپنی اولاد سے کہیں بڑھ کے غم یہ پیارا ہے یا زہرا یا زہرا یا زہرا یا زہرا ان شہیدوں کا یہ مقدر ہے سائبہ ان کا تیری چادر ہے ان کے سینوں پہ اے میری بی بی داغ ماتم نشان حیدر ہے یا زہرا یا زہرا یا زہرا یا زہرا ए मेरी बीबी खुल्द में शहीद जब जाए तेरी आवाज आए आने दो ये हमारा है या ज़हरा या ज़हरा या ज़हरा या ज़हरा Prophet Muhammad salawat salli ala
Sheikh Bilal, Dr. Dungyasi, respected elders, brothers and sisters in Iman, Adam Allah ajurna wa ajurakum. Tonight's Yasin has been sponsored for the Athal Thawab of the Marhumeens that are displayed on the screen. Let us all recite Surah Fatiha for all Marhumeens. Bismillah. Tomorrow, Friday, Salatul Jummah will start at 11:15 a.m. with Sheikh Bilal, starting with Dua Nudba, followed by our Ayyam-e-Fatimiyyah program at 8:15 p.m., starting with Surah Yasin. On Saturday, we will be having a ladies-only Ayyam-e-Fatimiyyah program, enlightening our lives through the Lady of Light, starting with Zohar Namaz at 12 p.m. It will be an interactive panel discussion, Quran reflection, and group recitations, followed by our Ayyam-e-Fatimiyyah evening program, the actual Wafat night at 6:30 p.m., starting with Niyaz. On Sunday, Madrasa will start at 10:45 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. We are requesting all community members to please contribute $250 towards the below initiative that has been sent out on the newswire. We have some donors who have agreed to match any funds that are collected by December 15th. Kindly donate generously. Every contribution, big or small, makes a significant impact. Support our scholars and Tabligh initiatives. Join us in our mission to nurture and sustain our spiritual community. We are currently raising funds for the Alim Fund and Tabligh costs, which are vital for supporting our resident scholars and a variety of Tabligh-related activities. Your generous contributions will enable us to continue providing valuable educational programs, engaging community services, and the spiritual guidance that enriches our lives. Our target is to raise $120,000 by December 31st, but again, we have a donor that's willing to match it, and this will ensure our Alim and Tabligh fund deficit is taken care of before we close the books for the end of the year. Together, we can ensure that our community remains a beacon of knowledge, faith, and unity. We thank you for your support. Please join me in reciting the ayah of Amma Yujib 5 times for all those who are sick here and around the world. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Amma yujibul mustarriza dha'u wa yakshifu su. 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 Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Please recite aloud salawat as we call up Sheikh Bilal. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad.
رحم الله من يقرأ سورة الفاتحة. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ربي اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. الحمد لله رب العالمين، ثم الصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب إله العالمين أبي القاسم محمد. وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين، واللعنة على أعدائهم أجمعين من الآن إلى قيام يوم الدين. أما بعد، فقد قال الله تعالى في محكم كتابه الحكيم: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. يا أيها الناس إنا خلقناكم من ذكر وأنثى وجعلناكم شعوبا وقبائل لتعارفوا إن أكرمكم عند الله أتقاكم إن الله عليم خبير. آمنا بالله، صدق الله العلي العظيم. اللهم صل على محمد. Your second salawat for love of Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad. And your loudest salawat for ta'ajil faraj sahib al-asr wa zaman. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa Ali. أعظم الله أجورنا وأجوركم بذكر المسائب آل Muhammad. May Allah increase in our reward for commemorating the difficulties of Ali Muhammad. As it is Thursday night, and our tradition is on Thursday nights that we mention some ahkam of fiqh. Very briefly, mubtilat of salat, things that break your prayers, are 12. From amongst them, in brief mention, are all of those things that break a person's wudu. That if wudu breaks, salat breaks. From amongst them is turning away from the direction of qibla. That if one happens to be in the condition of prayer and they turn where they are no longer facing the direction of qibla and they're turned away from qibla entirely, their salat is broken. Within this case is the aspect of turning away one's face from the direction of qibla. It can happen that my shoulders and my body face qibla, but my head turns away. If my head turns away from the direction of qibla sufficiently where I can see behind myself, my salat is broken. Even if it so happens that the rest of my body is facing the direction of qibla, my face, my eyes being able to see behind me entirely and see what's behind me is sufficient for my salat to be broken. Amongst these are other conditions that, for example, the speaking during salat. That if one speaks a phrase or a statement other than the adhkar, dua or Quran of salat, prayers are broken. Now, what constitutes speaking? What constitutes speaking is any word that is composed of 2 letters or more. That if the sound that I make is composed of 2 letters, then that's considered speech. And if it is speech, it breaks my prayers. It can happen that I make a sound of 1 letter in my prayers. But if that 1 letter sound has a meaning that is understood and expected and used in speech, then that 1 letter is sufficient to break my prayers as well too. For example, would you like some ice cream? A. A is understood to mean yes. Then therefore my prayers are broken. You can have your ice cream, but your prayers have to be repeated. In this way, speech too is something that breaks our salat. Understanding this rule, one of the other characteristics and one of the other 12 numbered attributes that break a person's prayers is a person who says the phrase of Ameen in their salat. An understanding of why we insist that this is something that violates prayers is it doesn't fit any of the 3 categories of permissible speech in prayer. It is not a dhikr, it is not a dua, and it is not Quran. So it fits into the category of speech that's incorporated into prayer. Further to that, if it's something that I believe is matloob, meaning Allah has asked me for, then I have added something to salat that is not a part of salat, and that too is a condition by which it voids my prayers. This entire clause of speech in prayer and what's permissible in prayer is one of the conversations that comes up, that is shahadat-e-thalitha permitted in prayers. Now this is a longer discussion to have. However, the biggest proponent of saying that the enunciation when we recite tashahhud in salat, that we don't incorporate shahadat-e-thalitha, for those that understand what that means, that's sufficient, is by this fact that this statement doesn't belong in prayer, not because our aqeedah is bad, but that the shurut of salat don't allow it to be incorporated into prayer. As this statement is neither a dua, nor is it a dhikr, nor is it Qur'an. So therefore we say that this should not be a part of salah. Now there's a larger conversation that goes with this, and if Allah gives us tawfiq, we'll have it. But the final statement that we'll mention of those which are mubtalat as-salat is the idea of adding something and considering to be a part of prayer that is not a part of prayer. And from amongst this, one of those conditions is a person who intentionally folds their hands and says, Allah wants me to do this in prayer, as it is not matlub, it is not asked for by Allah in prayers. That action then voids the prayers. Now this doesn't mean that, for example, if I have an itch on my elbow, oh, my prayers are over. No, because a person who is itching their arm is not doing it with the intention that Allah has asked me to do this action, or that doing this is wajib upon me to perform in my prayer. Anyone who brings an action, for example, folding their hands in salat and says, هَذَا جُزْءٌ مِنَ الصَّلَاةِ, this is a piece of prayer, it will void his prayer because he has added something to prayer that Allah has not asked for. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali. The verse of Qur'an we're beginning our discussion with tonight, and inshallah across the series of these 3 nights, we'll talk about aspects from the biography, the spirituality, and the practical lessons taught to us through the daughter of Rasulullah, Fatima Zahra, salamullahi alayha. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. The introduction to the biography of this lady comes from this verse. That's, O mankind, Ya ayyuhan nas. Certainly we have created you from men and women. وَشَبُؤُمًا وَقَبَائِلَ لِتَعَارَفُوا, and made you into clans and families so that you may know one another. إِنَّا أَكْرَمَكُمْ عِنْدَ اللَّهِ أَتْقَاكُمْ. That those who are closest to Allah are those who are the pious. This use of the word taqwa in this ayah has a depth of meaning that is important to understand. There are certain terms that have a linguistic definition and then have a shari'i definition. And there is a difference between the application of both of these. I'll give you an example. The kalima salat means pray, to make dua. And it was used in that way until the life of the Prophet. And after the time of our Prophet, it became specific to mean the prayer and salat in the way that we perform it now. But prior to that, it was used as a dua that could be recited as well too. So the question comes, in what context when we see the word salat in locations, does it mean the religious meaning of the 5 daily prayers that we perform? And in what context does it mean those actions which are seen as dua or supplication of Allah in general? Similarly, kalimat taqwa has a linguistic meaning and then it has a shara'i meaning. Linguistically, it means ijtinab anish shay. Someone who avoids an action is someone who performs taqwa, because literally it means someone who keeps away from an item. A person can do taqwa anil lahum, they can do taqwa and avoid eating meat. They can do taqwa from a variety of different actions. However, shar'an, when it comes to the kalimat taqwa, this taqwa means one who does specifically the avoidance of ma'asi and sins from Allah. When we look at the verse in Surah Al-Hujurat that tells us, Inna akramakum indallahi atqakum, that those who are closest to Allah are those who perform taqwa, we understand from the context and relationship that the taqwa that is being referenced here pertains to avoiding that which Allah hates, not necessarily simply the linguistic use of taqwa, that you avoid one thing, therefore Allah likes you. No, the reference of having proximity to Allah is the shari'i taqwa, the religious taqwa that is associated with staying away from maharimillah, those things that Allah has forbidden us from. Now what's interesting is, those things that Allah has forbidden us from, as a society and as a collective, we understand and appreciate half of this definition, not its entirety. Let me explain what that. You guys are okay? We're going to be a little technical before we get to the history part. Everybody's all right? Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Taqwa as a concept is seen as avoiding that which Allah dislikes. And when we think of what does Allah dislike, we always go to the concept of ibadat. And we say salat, saum, hajj, zakat, that performing these actions Allah likes. Not performing these actions is what Allah hates. To perform those actions that Allah hates is one who is ghayri muttaqi, and one who sticks to those actions and performs them correctly is muttaqi, is someone who is pious. And we look at ibadat and we encapsulate this meaning in ibadat. However, the laws of Allah are ibadat and mu'amilat. Meaning that the category of when Islam comes to us, Islam doesn't just tell us to pray and to fast and to go to Hajj and to give khums and to do jihad. It also tells us what is our connection and relationship and how do we interact with the rest of society. Those are known as mu'amilat. Within mu'amilat, there are those things that Allah hates and dislikes. And a person to be muttaqi, it's not enough that I did the ibadat that Allah loves, but also that I performed my mu'amilat in the way that Allah loves. Then I become someone who is muttaqi, someone who is parhezgar, someone who is pious, someone who is beloved to Allah because my relationship with Him is in my ibadat. I avoided what He hates and I performed what He commands. And in my dealing with humanity, I did what He loves and I avoided what He hates. Amongst the concept of mu'amilat and what are the things that are a person that is muttaqi that they do in mu'amilat, some are very straightforward. For example, the selling of alcohol, the selling of pig are forbidden actions. They are something that Allah has forbidden us to do. Not performing them makes us someone who is pious. But then there are other actions as well too within the contracts and relationships in society that we have to pay attention to. That performing them is haram for us to perform them, whether we discuss them as a community or not. One of these items is what's called, as an example, so this is not exclusive to this, there are actually books written about this subject as well too, that talk about makasib al-muharrama, that those things that in the buying and selling are forbidden for us to perform and to learn from those items. One of those items is called najash. Najash is a concept that exists in our society collectively, not uniquely this community or our society as the Shia of Sijni in New York, but in general. But it isn't talked about. It's ignored as one of those consequences that we should be paying attention to. This term refers to the idea of one who falsely raises the price and value of an object without any intention of actually buying it. That, for example, in the market price, for example, for a vehicle, for a phone, is $100. But my desire is that for my vehicle, my object, I sell it for more than $100. So what do? I motion to my friend that when the price reaches $100, you ask bid more for it so people think that it's better than what else is out there, and I get more for my item. This action is haram in the religion of Islam. It is forbidden to perform this action. And when we call ourselves muttaqi, it's not sufficient that my ibadat are complete, but even actions like this are forbidden for me to perform, and I don't have the right to perform them. Another example of this category of actions comes from the idea of one who gives their word to forgive a loan or to forgive an amount and then reverses it. It's haram. Even if I have a written document that says that you and I have an agreement that you will pay me $100. $100 is the example of the day. And I forgive it. I say it's forgiven for you. And then I see later on that now you found $200. I say, hey, I want my $100 back. You say, but you forgave it to me. He says, no, but I have a written contract. I can take it to court and force you to give me this money. That action in Islam, to go back on one's word in a contract, in any structure of that contract, whether it's written or not, is not permissible in Islam. It's not allowed in Islam. Therefore, when we talk about the concept of taqwa, it's important to understand that it's not sufficient that I call myself muttaqi. Yes, with Allah, whatever Allah has commanded me in ibadat, I fulfill exactly. But then when it comes to mu'amilat and dealing with society as a whole and the hukuk al-nas, there is nothing off limits. I can do anything, I do anything. There is no restriction upon me in this process. We would say, هَذَا غَيْرُ الْمُتَّقِي. This is not someone who is pious. Why? Because the piety of Allah is not simply associated with hukuk Allah. There is elements of hukuk al-nas that requires they be executed exactly as Allah demands. When one completes these actions on both sides, in my business dealings you can see my piety and fear of Allah. I am not afraid of humanity, that humanity can criticize me. Many times it happens. I have a right in society. I can choose to exercise my right, whether people like it or not, it's mine. But I don't, not because it's my right, I do it, I don't do it, or I do it because Allah wants to see this action performed, then I can call myself a pious person. The significance of understanding this concept of piety is Allah is the one who is differentiating in society. He says, all of you humanity, whether you be men or women, none of you is superior to another. Your family, your lineage, your structure gives you no authority over another person except on the basis that you enact this piety. If you enact this piety, then you have a status close and proximate to me. Otherwise, there is no status and position for you. Allah does not differentiate and say that this is for men, this is for women. He says, all of you people, the way that you will attain proximity to me is by being the ones who fear what I have commanded you to avoid and perform that which I have commanded you to perform. Understanding this, when we turn to the biography of the daughter of the Holy Prophet, a question can be asked. Why do we honor her? Why do we prefer her? Why do we give her the status that we do? The status that we give her is on the basis of the fact of her piety and proximity to Allah. To understand this, we have to look a little bit back at history and do a little bit of analysis in history. You guys ready? Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Looking at the collective of history, looking at the mass narrative of history and what happens in history, if we were to ask the question, how many children did our Holy Prophet have? How many children? Ittifaq, agreement amongst all Muslimin, is that he had 3 sons. Qasim, Abdullah or Tahir, and Ibrahim. But when the question comes to how many daughters did the Prophet have, there are 2 unique answers to this question. One answer specifies and simply states that he had 1 daughter, and this Bibi Fatima is the 1 daughter that our Prophet had. And this is in the minority of the narrative. The other structure of the narrative says that our Prophet had 4 daughters, all of whom were born to Sayyidah Khadija. These 4 daughters are Zainab, Ruqayya, and Kulthum, and then the final of these daughters that was born in the time of Islam was this Bibi Fatima. The extent of this narrative that our Prophet had 4 daughters is not unique to the other madhahib, but rather even within our own madhab, there are those ulama who agreed with this statement and who said that this statement is true, that our Prophet had 4 daughters. To the extent where Ayyam-e Majlisi, when he writes Kitab Hayat al-Qulub, which is a tarikh of the Anbiya, and especially our Prophet, it spends a lot of time on, Ayyam-e Majlisi himself quotes and narrates, and he says that our Prophet had 4 daughters, all of whom were born from Sayyidah Khadija, Zainab, Ruqayya, Kulthum, and then Bibi Fatima. Now, the discussion about the 4 of these daughters and the history of the first 3 and what happens in their history, all 3 of these older daughters are narrated in history, whether they are actually his children or not. All are narrated to have died by about the 7th year after Hijrah in the life of the Prophet, and the only daughter that outlived the Prophet is this daughter Fatima. A discussion is had that says that these 3 daughters, were they actual daughters of the Holy Prophet or were they adopted daughters of the Holy Prophet? One narration says that Sayyidah Khadija had a sister who, when she passed away, her 3 daughters, Zainab, Ruqayya, Kulthum, were adopted by the Prophet and were raised in the house of the Prophet, similar to the idea of Zayd, who was raised in the house of the Prophet. It's a discussion that happens in history. However, when we look at the events of history of the differentiation between Sayyidah Fatima and these other 3 daughters, one of the fundamentals of why we are attached to this daughter over the other 3 is on the basis of her proximity and her taqwa that she exercised in her life, that made her unique. That should history want to argue and say, no, that there are 4 daughters, we would say, we accept. Fine. Majority of historians, even some amongst the Shia, even some of the narrations of Ahlul Bayt, talk about the idea that these were daughters of the Prophet. There are. However, when we look at the commemoration of the Shahadat, that we commemorate this year and in this month on the 3rd of Jamad al-Akhir, as well as the Wiladat that we commemorate and celebrate in this month on the 20th of Jamad al-Akhir, is only associated with this 1 daughter of the Holy Prophet. Only 1. Because it's on the basis of her piety and character and proximity to Allah. When we look at the ahkam of Islam, when we look at the history of Islam, when we look at the mustahabbat of Islam, the one of these daughters who is tied to all of these examples and her piety is appointed by the Prophet himself is none other than Fatima az-Zahra salamullahi alayha. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. That if we were to say that there is a significance to this personality, that we are mandated to stay attached to her, we would say it's because if there were other children, her differentiation amongst all of them is her piety and status, that no other daughter of Rasulullah is referred to as Umme Abiha. That her relationship to Rasulullah was unique. Her character in the faith of Islam was unique. Her possession of tasbih was unique. All of these attributes that tie to her show that her status was something special and unique, which is why learning lessons from her life, paying attention to her character, looking at her biography, learning from her sunnah, paying attention to the culture of her household, paying attention to her spirituality, all become the aspects by which we attach ourselves closer to the example of Allah, and therefore ignorance of her time, her life, her death is something that no Muslim can afford, because Allah has indicated that by her proximity to Allah, she has attained a unique status amongst all of humanity. This is our importance of paying attention to this, which is why even when we take a look at her biography, we see that her nature, her behavior was something different. Mentioning briefly tonight, for her biography amongst the first of these majalis. This daughter of the Holy Prophet is the one who is born after the advent of Islam. There are two sets of years that are given, either the second year after the Annunciation or the 5th year after the Annunciation of the religion of Islam. This daughter of the Prophet is married. She spends approximately 3 years in the company of her mother, or 4 years before the death of Sayyidah Khadija, after which she becomes the housemate of Rasulullah, who then takes the responsibility of taking care of the Holy Prophet. As a child, the relationship between Bibi Fatima and her father is unique, in that though we don't possess all of the attributes of what happens in the household, the Prophet himself indicates some unique statuses. He says, this daughter of mine is as if she is the mother of her father. That how she cares for me. Rasulullah does not give this title easily. Sayyidah Khadija is a very pious wife. She is the fundamental, upon her wealth is the fundamental upon which the religion of Islam is built. She gives all of her wealth in the way of Islam. Yet Rasulullah never gives her the title that she is the mother of her husband. Nor is it for anyone else other than this one daughter. When we look at the history, we see the examples that when our Prophet is praying next to the Kaaba, and the enemies of Islam, they come and they spill the placenta of a camel on the Prophet to disrespect him and degrade him. It is this daughter who comes, removes the filth, and chastises the enemies of Islam in care and consideration of her father, regardless of the risk to life and health. Is that love? The uniqueness of that status. 2 years after Hijrah is when it is noted that this daughter of the Holy Prophet is married. And that from amongst history, it is noted that there were over 7, 9, or even more people who asked for this daughter's hand in marriage. For none other is there this kind of a structure that's listed, which is one of the reasons why when we look at the context clues of history, we become confident that it is likely this was the only real daughter of the Prophet, not adopted daughter, on the principle that there is no history of the asking for marriage to the extent that the marriage was asked for this daughter. As a matter of fact, the daughter Zainab, who is referred to as the oldest of these daughters, is said to have been married to a polytheist. The second of these daughters, Ruqayya, is said to have been married to the third Khalifa, Uthman. And after her death, Kulthum is also have been said to have been married to the third Khalifa, Uthman. By the possession of these two marriages, the laqab of Dhu Nurain was falsely given to the third Khalifa. Dhu Nurain meaning the possessor of the two lights. And the argument was presented that yes, because the third Khalifa was married to the two daughters of the Prophet, he became known as Dhu Nurain. This title, amongst the other titles that the Khulafa possessed, is a usurped title. The true possessor of this title was none other than Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam. And he was the one who was known by even our Prophet, Ya Ali, Anta Dhu Nurain. Oh Ali, you are the possessor of the two lights. وَمَا هُوَ نُورَيْن. And what are those two lights? They are the Imaman, Imam Hassan and Imam Hussein alayhimus salam. But there is no discussion around the depth and truth of these marriages, that should they have been the daughters of the Prophet, but rather what we see is that the marriage of Sayyidah Fatima is something that is discussed in history and presented, that many possessed and the interest and actively pursued the marriage to this daughter of the Prophet. And all of them were turned away until it was Allah who indicated and explained and said that it will be none other than the proposal of Ali ibn Abi Talib that was brought for the hand of Fatima az-Zahra salamullahi alayha. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali. During this time, from the second year after Hijrah until the Shahadat of the Sayyidah and the Shahadat of our Prophet, is a period of 9 years that are spent in marriage. Amongst these 9 years, it is well known that Bibi Fatima had 4 children, with the 5th who had been named by the Prophet but died before his birth. It is also well known that in this time she also served the religion of Islam in many different capacities, and many ahadith come to us from her of her piety and her lifestyle of how she lived it. Whether we take a look at her service of her father in the battle of Uhud, that when he becomes injured, she is the nurse who comes to assist him and nurses those who are in need. Whether she is the one who in the battle of Khandaq is the one who is providing resources to the front line and offering aid in the military aspects of this community and its development, or from the aspect of piety and teaching, where she is a teacher amongst the ladies and amongst society, and we receive narrations about the status of women from her example and her personality. The most extensive period of information that we possess about this lady comes after the Shahadat of the Holy Prophet at the end of her life, which is a period of maybe 45 days. And this becomes a significant point of paying attention to what we know about this lady and why her life is so significant, that suddenly after the death of the Prophet she becomes very active and her voice becomes very well known. And this phase of her life where the Shahadat of the Prophet takes place, that suddenly now she is exposed, is where she stands in support of the position of Imamat and stands against the Khilafat. And this is a very vocal position that takes in this point in her life. The argument that comes is that after the Shahadat of the Prophet, that she pleads for, or she requests her property of Fadak, and she stands for the position of Fadak. This discussion about why that lady who in the life of the Holy Prophet was one who used to be respected for her zuhud, meaning her avoidance of wealth, her avoidance of material possessions, her giving away of the wealth and possessions that she had in her house, suddenly changes to where now she is pleading and fighting for material wealth, is something that is conflictory in the history of Islam. However, when we understand the structure and the intelligence of Sayyidah Fatima, we understand that this statement for Fadak was not for Fadak itself, but was rather the most appropriate way for her to stand in the support of the Imamat of Imam Ali. You see, had it been that Sayyidah stands up after the Shahadat of her father and comes forward and says, "Give the Khilafat to my husband," they would say, "Your voice has no value, you are simply one who is protesting for the sake of your husband. Because he is your most proximal relationship, you demand that we give to you those comforts and values and possessions that you had in the life of the Prophet, that you should not have them taken away from you." If you pay attention, the daughter of the first Khalifa is supposedly have had made such statements like this in the daughter of the third Khalifa and standing against the Khilafat of Imam Ali. Why? Because her status had been decreased by this position. Had we seen Sayyidah Fatima stand up in this way, the value of the claim of Imam Ali would have been depreciated, that people would not have honored and appreciated the value of the claim and the authority of Ali ibn Abi Talib to the Imamat. So rather what Sayyidah does is she beseeches for that right which is uniquely hers and no one else's, in the demonstration of showing that if I can prove that my father had bequeathed property, if my father was intelligent enough to know to bequeath property, why would he not know then to bequeath the government of Islam to someone as well? Her position and fighting and being vocal in this aspect was not for the possession of material, but her piety here is shown as honoring in the most dignified and appropriate way the command of Allah, that where does the authority of humanity go after Rasulullah? That when we look at her history and her biography, it is important to understand that these 2 points are not conflictual. That she was someone who is known for her piety in the life of Rasulullah, and immediately after he leaves, she's one who chases material. No. But that proof that Rasulullah gave material possession to someone, and he had the right to give material possession, then you cannot argue that there was someone who was appointed for the government and it was not something that was left vacant and a vacuum for anyone to take. And no one can question the authenticity of the claim, nor can anyone say that someone who stands against Sayyidah Fatima could be correct, because the legitimacy of her claim, she establishes firmly in Khutbah Fadaqiyah, in the speech of Fadaq, where she beseeches and says that my right has been stolen. I shall explain to you what my right is from the Quran. In this one speech of Sayyidah Fatima, she goes through and enumerates over 45 verses of the Holy Quran in defense of her position and in defense of the status and the knowledge of Islam that she possesses. She goes through and she structures her entire argument that she says, if you refuse to believe the example of my father and listen to his words, then this Quran that you insist is sufficient to you, from that I shall prove to you my claim. When we look at the life and history of Sayyidah Fatima, there are not as many narrations as the rest of the Ma'sumin that we possess from her. We possess fewer. But on the basis of this one speech, her status and her knowledge is explained in clarity. She begins her speech by discussing and announcing the attributes of Allah in a way that no one has explained them ever before. Where she begins and she says, the hamd and thana of the one who created everything from non-existence. Not from something, not from anything, but that from non-existence, the one who brings into creation is none other than the glorified Allah. This was a unique attribute in which she presented her argument and her discussion. When we look at the history, and again, inshallah, tomorrow we'll look at and we'll go into the details of the lessons of society that are established through the biography of this lady. And Saturday night, we'll look at the unique spiritual status that is taught to us by this lady and elaborate on the ma'rifat that one who possesses the knowledge and understanding of this lady has attained something great and proximal to Allah. But even from this, looking at her biography very briefly, this life that she possesses, whether we accept that she was born in the 2nd year after the enunciation of the message of Islam, or the 5th year after the enunciation of Islam, her death is agreed upon collectively that happens in the 11th year after Hijrah, not 4 months after the Shahadat of our Prophet. That the question history should ask is of twofold. One is to say, looking at the fact that we all agree this daughter existed, why did she die at such a young age? It's not a natural death. That a young woman of the age of 18 or 25 or 23 does not die so quickly and at such a young age. The other structure of the question is, where is her grave? The discussion around the location of the grave of Sayyidah Fatima is one of the significant conversations that presents to us and shows to us that her death is not something that fits the criteria of anyone else of that time. That had it been a natural process, there would have been no difference that today we know where many of these graves are. We know where many of these people were buried. We can visit their graves. But why is it then that the daughter that every Muslim agrees is the daughter of Rasulullah, is the one who he called Abiha? Why is it not possible for us to see where her grave is? Why has this been hidden from us? The initial step of this process begins how not 5 days after the Shahadat of our Holy Prophet, they did not respect the sanctity of this daughter of the Prophet. That it is said that after the Shahadat of the Prophet, when they wanted to collect the bay'ah from the Muslimin, those who abstained and said that no, the truth of the authority stands in the house of Ali, in the hands of Ali, the house of Fatima became a sanctuary for these people. Until which the enemies, they came and they said that void and invalidate the sanctuary of this house and ensure that Ali comes and pays his bay'ah. If Ali does not give bay'ah, then the authority will not be established firmly. So the Khulafa would send people to the door of this house to plead and beseech that send Ali out, he must give the bay'ah. He must give the acceptance of the khilafat that has been stolen from him. When they would be sent, they would be turned away until eventually it was said, send a military force to the door. It was sent once. And Sayyidah came herself to the door and explained, do you dare to void the sanctity of me, the daughter of the Prophet? The people became ashamed and they left. Until eventually they came in a format in which they said they raised the hujum around the house of Fatima. A hujum is that noisy clamor of military and army present outside of the door of the family of Rasulullah. When this hujum takes place, the one who comes to the door again is the daughter of the Prophet. Why? Because it is known that they are looking for Ali. If Ali comes to the door, they will definitely not respect the sanctity of this house. So it is the daughter of the Prophet who comes to the door in the same way that her asking for a fadak was in defense of Ali ibn Abi Talib. Her standing at this door in that moment was in the protection and the defense of Imamat. She is amongst the first who are the shaheed for the Imam. She stands at the door and she says to them that you have laid firewood in front of my door. Have you no respect of the sanctity of the door at which Rasulullah would say salam? My Prophet would not enter this house without saying salam to me first. Yet you are raising swords outside of my door. You are placing firewood outside of my door. O Muslimin, do you not realize that a short time ago it was Rasulullah who was on his deathbed, and one would come and knock at this door in respect, and Fatima Zahra would turn him away until frustration was raised in her voice. Rasulullah asked, O Fatima, why do I see you frustrated? She says, there is a questioner who has come to the door. I keep turning him away, but he keeps returning. Oh Father, he will not leave us alone. Rasulullah in that instance explained, oh my dearest Fatima, this is Malikul Maut who comes to your door, but does not enter your house out of the respect for your sanctity. Allow him to enter. It was that same door, not 3 months later, that now that army laid wood at the door and said, if you do not send out Ali, then we shall light this door on fire. She says, even if the daughter of Rasulullah is standing here, the Mal'un replied, Walo, even if it should be the case, we will not respect this sanctity. When the door was lit to fire, she put out her hand to say, recognize, this is the daughter of Rasulullah, pleading with you to leave my house. They describe and say, one mal'un took a whip and struck at this hand. Another pushed the door. They describe as this door was pushed. They say that we heard a sound as this lady was stuck between the door and the wall, as her feet were lifted from the ground because of this pressure. They say that we heard a noise, that it was as if we heard the breaking of glass. When they asked the Imam, what was this noise that sounded like the breaking of glass? He says, Fatima kanat awra insiya. This daughter of Rasulullah was an angelic being in human form. Her form was not like ours. When she was pressed between the door, the sound that you heard of breaking of glass was the breaking of the ribs of the daughter of Rasulullah. That she was not like us, that when she cried in that moment, that noise was not like a noise you would hear anywhere else. They describe she was pressed behind this burning door. Ali ibn Abi Talib rushed from the house as the news came that Sakata Janinuha, that her child has been lost. Fatima is the first amongst the shuhada, but she is not the first. The first is that child that Rasulullah had named in his life. Oh Fatima, after me there will be Muhsin, but Muhsin is the first who joins his grandfather. They describe and they say, how did Ali leave the house in this condition? One describes and he says, we saw Ali leave his cloak and run from the door. They said, why did you see him run? They said, he calls out, oh Fiza, bury this child. Ali does not have the patience to see the children of Rasulullah killed, that he leaves his cloak over the Shaheed Muhsin, proceeds from the door. They ask, oh, how did you take Ali from his house? The Mal'unin described, we took a rope and tied it around the neck of Ali and dragged him through the streets of Medina. They said, that Ali, who was the champion of Islam, how did you have the daring They said, we had seen Rasulullah explain, "Oh Ali, after my shahadat, be patient through the trials they put you through. Do not raise your sword." We knew that Ali had been commanded for patience. Therefore, we abused him in a way that we knew he would not stop us. Seeing this condition of Amir al-Mu'mineen, they say that Sayyidah Zahra ran from her house in spite of her injuries and pleaded with the people that release Ali, release the commander of the faithful, release the authority of Allah. They turned upon Fatima to Zahra. Someone raised the scabbard of a sword. Someone raised the whip. They struck the daughter of Rasulullah in the streets of Medina in such a way that history narrates Fatima to Zahra wept in the streets and said, "I am now not asking you to release Ali. I am asking you to stop the beating of the daughter of Rasulullah." They describe and say that when Ali was taken before the Khalifa, Sayyidah Fatima stood outside, raised her hands in dua and said, "O enemies of Allah, if you do not release Ali in this instance, I shall make a dua against you that will bring the city of Medina upon itself." They said, as the hands of the daughter were raised, we saw the walls of the city of Medina raised above the ground. One mu'arrikh writes, they were raised to an extent that a camel could have passed under them. In fear, they released Ali ibn Abi Talib, and the city of Medina returned to its condition. As the two proceeded back to the house, Ali asked about Fatima, Fatima asked about Ali. Ali asked, "O daughter of the Prophet, are you okay?" The wife of Amir al-Mu'mineen replies, she says, "O Ali, if you are okay, then I am okay." Upon this statement, the two proceed towards the house. In this, Imam Ali sees Imam Hassan walking with him. Imam Hassan weeps. Imam Ali says, "Oh my child, why are you crying?" Imam Hassan replies, as one narrator puts it, he says, "Oh Baba, if you would have seen what I saw, you would have wept the way that I am crying now." Amir al-Mu'mineen says, "My son, what have you seen?" He says, "Baba, I saw them strike my mother's face to where they injured her eye." Amir al-Mu'mineen replies, "Oh my son, this is why when Fatima now spoke to me, she did not look me in the eye, that I would not see the injury that has been cast upon her. It was these very injuries that in a short while after this event, the daughter of Rasulullah left this world and left angry to where we do not know where her grave is today." ألا لعنة الله على القوم الظالمين وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون ورضا بقضائه وتسليما لأمره ندعوك باسمك العظيم الأعظم الأعز الأجل الأكرم. We raise our hands in dua and call out 10 times, Ya Allah, 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 Ya Allah. يا الله بحق فاطمة وأبيها وبعلها وبنيها والسر المستودع فيها. Oh Allah, accept this small ibadat from us. Ya Allah, forgive our sins and cover our flaws. Oh Allah, keep us with those whom Sayyidah Zahra is pleased with. Make us not amongst the enemies of Sayyidah Zahra. Oh Allah, we have gathered here with hajat by the right of this Thursday night, by the right of Sayyidah Zahra, fulfill our hajat. Ya Allah, there are those amongst our families, our communities, and the mu'mineen who are suffering through sickness and disease. Ya Allah, give shafa'at to the mu'mineen wherever they are. Oh Allah, by the right of this Thursday night, by the right of the mention of Ahl Bayt, there are those amongst us who possess hajat. Ya Allah, fulfill our hajat. There are those who are suffering through difficulty. Ya Allah, remove the difficulties and fulfill the needs of the mu'mineen. Oh Allah, there are those around the world who are suffering through difficulty and insecurity. Ya Allah, give aman to the believers wherever they are. Oh Allah, hasten the reappearance of Sahib al-Zaman. Make us and our children from the upright supporters of Sahib al-Zaman. Entitle us to the ziyarat of Abu Abdullah in this world and the shafa of Abu Abdullah in the hereafter. Rahimullah man yaqra Surat al-Fatiha ma'a salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Fatima Hussein.
یا زہرا یا زہرا یا زہرا. کہاں جائے آخر بیابان ہر سو، شکستہ ہے پہلو اکیلی ہے زہرا. کہاں جائے آخر بیابان ہر سو، شکستہ ہے پہلو اکیلی ہے زہرا. رونے پہ پہرا مصائب کا صحرا اکیلی ہے زہرا. رونے پہ پہرا مصائب کا صحرا اکیلی ہے زہرا. در فاطمہ کو جلایا ہے تم نے، کیا وعد اپنا بھلایا ہے تم نے. در فاطمہ کو جلایا ہے تم نے، کیا وعد اپنا بھلایا ہے تم نے. تماچے نہ مارو مسلمانو جاؤ، علی کا بلاؤ اکیلی ہے زہرا. رونے پہ پہرا مصائب کا صحرا اکیلی ہے زہرا. رونے پہ پہرا مصائب کا صحرا اکیلی ہے زہرا. پیا کس سے جا کر کروں درد اپنا، ہے غیروں کی دنیا نہیں کوئی اپنا. پیا کس سے جا کر کروں درد اپنا، ہے غیروں کی دنیا نہیں کوئی اپنا. کوئی جا کے بابا سے کہہ دو یہ جا کر کہ لے جاؤ آ کر اکیلی ہے زہرا. رونے پہ پہرا مصائب کا صحرا اکیلی ہے زہرا. رونے پہ پہرا مصائب کا صحرا اکیلی ہے زہرا. لخت جگر حسن ابن حیدر، یہ نانا کے پہلو میں سونے نہ دے گر. لخت جگر حسن ابن حیدر، یہ نانا کے پہلو میں سونے نہ دے گر. تم آ جانا پہلو میں سو جانا ماں کے بکی میں یہاں پر اکیلی ہے زہرا. رونے پہ پہرا مصائب کا صحرا اکیلی ہے زہرا. رونے پہ پہرا مصائب کا صحرا اکیلی ہے زہرا. شہ کربلا نے کہا رو کے ماں سے، یہ مظلوم بیٹے نے مظلوم ماں سے. شہ کربلا نے کہا رو کے ماں سے، یہ مظلوم بیٹے نے مظلوم ماں سے. ایک کھیلا ہوں میں بھی اکیلی ہے زینب، اکیلے ہے بابا اکیلی ہے زہرا. رونے پہ پہرا مصائب کا صحرا اکیلی ہے زہرا. رونے پہ پہرا مصائب کا صحرا اکیلی ہے زہرا. سر مرگ اختر زہرا کا نوحہ، کب آؤ گے مہدی کب آؤ گے بیٹا. سر مرگ اختر زہرا کا نوحہ، کب آؤ گے مہدی کب آؤ گے بیٹا. خدا کے لیے اب یہ پردہ ہٹا دو، چلے آؤ آؤ اکیلی ہے زہرا. رونے پہ پہرا مصائب کا صحرا اکیلی ہے زہرا. رونے پہ پہرا مصائب کا صحرا اکیلی ہے زہرا. صلاۃ علی محمد و آل محمد. زیارت وارثہ.
جارة وارثة جارة إمام حسين. السلام عليك يا وارثة آدم صفوة الله. السلام عليك يا وارثة نوح النبي الله. السلام عليك يا وارثة إبراهيم خليل الله. السلام عليك يا وارثة موسى كليم الله. السلام عليك يا وارثة عيسى روح الله. السلام عليك يا وارثة محمد حبيب الله. السلام عليك يا وارثة علي أمير المؤمنين ولي الله. السلام عليك يا ابن محمد المصطفى. السلام عليك يا ابن علي المرتضى. السلام عليك يا ابن فاطمة الزهراء. السلام عليك يا ابن خديجة الكبرى. السلام عليك يا ثار الله يا ابن ثابي والوتر الموتور. أشهد أنك قد أقمت الصلاة وأعطيت الزكاة وأمرت بالمعروف ونهيت عن المنكر وأطعت الله ورسوله حتى أتاك اليقين. فلعن الله متى قتلت ولعن الله متى ظلمت ولعن اللهم متى سميت بذلك فرضيت به. يا مولاي يا أبا عبد الله أشهد أنك كنت نورا في الأصلاب الشامخة والأرحام المطهرة لم تنجسك الجاهلية بأنجاسها ولم تلبسك من ملهمات ثيابها. وأشهد أنك من داعم الدين وأركان المؤمنين. وأشهد أنك الإمام البر التقي الرذي الذقي الهادي المهدي. وأشهد أن الأئمة من ولد كلمة التقوى وأعلام الهدى والأورة الوثقى والحجة على أهل الدنيا. وأشهد الله وملائكته وأنبياءه ورسوله أني بكم مؤمن وبيابكم موقن بشرائع ديني وخواتيم أملي وقلبي لقلبكم سلم وأمري لأمركم متبع. صلوات الله عليكم وعلى أرواحكم وعلى أجسادكم وعلى أجسامكم وعلى شاهدكم وعلى غائبكم وعلى ظاهركم وعلى باطنكم. زيارة حضرة علي أكبر. السلام عليك يا ابن رسول الله. السلام عليك يا ابن نبي الله. السلام عليك يا ابن أمير المؤمنين. السلام عليك يا ابن الحسين الشهيد. السلام عليك أيها الشهيد وابن الشهيد. السلام عليك يا المظلوم وابن المظلوم. لعن الله متى قتلت ولعن الله متى ظلمت ولعن الله متى سميت بذلك فرضيت به. جاءت الشهداء كربلاء. السلام عليكم يا أولياء الله وأحباء. السلام عليكم يا أشفياء الله ووداء. السلام عليكم يا أنصار دين الله. السلام عليكم يا أنصار رسول الله. السلام عليكم يا أنصار أمير المؤمنين. السلام عليكم يا أنصار فاطمة سيدة نساء العالمين. السلام عليكم يا أنصار أبي محمد الحسن بن علي ولي الناصر. السلام عليكم يا أنصار أبي عبد الله. بأبي أنتم وأمي طبتم وطابت الأرض التي فيها دفنتم وفزتم فوزا عظيما. فيا ليتني كنت معكم فأفوز معكم. زيادة حضرة عباس. السلام عليك يا أبا الفضل عباس ابن أمير المؤمنين. السلام عليك يا ابن السيد الوسيم. السلام عليك يا ابن أول القوم إسلاما وأختمهم إيمانا وأخوتهم بدين الله وأخوتهم على الإسلام. أشهد لك أن نصحت لله ولرسوله ولأخيك فنعم الأخ المواصف. فلعن الله متى قتلت ولعن الله متى ظلمت ولعن الله متى استحلت منك المحارم وانتهكت حرمة الإسلام. فنعم الصابر المجاهد المحامي الناصر والأخ الدافع أخيه المجيب إلى طاعة الرب الراغب فيما زهد فيه غير من الثواب الجزيل والثناء الجميل. والحقق الله بدرجاتك آبائك في جنات النعيم. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله. السلام عليك يا ابن رسول الله. السلام عليك يا ابن أمير المؤمنين وابن السيد والسين. السلام عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء سيدة نساء العالمين. السلام عليك يا حسن المجتبى. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله الحسين ولا تسة المعصومين من ذريتك علي بن الحسين زين العابدين ومحمد بن علي الباقر وجعفر بن محمد الصادق وموسى بن جعفر الكاظم وعلي بن موسى الرضا ومحمد بن علي التقي الجواد وعلي بن محمد النقي الهادي والحسن بن علي العسكري. السلام عليك يا صاحب الزمان. السلام عليك يا شريك القرآن. السلام عليك يا كعبة الإيمان. السلام عليك يا إمام الأعوام الإنس والجان ورحمة الله وبركاته. اللهم